Today's video is brought to you by a new sponsor, Ridge Wallet, helping men everywhere toss that old, fat, uncomfortable back pocket wallet into the garbage where it definitely belongs. Gentlemen, it's the 21st century. It's a glorious time where we have all kinds of world-changing technology, and the best of that world-changing technology is a sleek, comfortable wallet that doesn't make it look like you've got a huge welt on your bottom when it's shoved in the back pocket. This is Ridge Wallet. It holds up to 12 cards plus room for cash. That tucks in there on the back. I have only a few cards in it. Who has 12 cards? I got like my ID, couple of credit cards. I mean, driver's license, I think. Health insurance card, yeah, so it's not that many. But it can hold 12 if you need it to. There's over 30 different styles. This one is burnt titanium. Another one I've got here is regular titanium. And there are 28 more. I'm not going to display them all because that would take forever, and I also don't have them. It also comes with RFID blocking technology that protects you from digital pickpockets, and a lifetime warranty, and a 45-day test period backed by a full refund. Ridge Wallet is awesome, and they got the public support to prove it. More than 40,000 5-star reviews. That's how amazing this little wallet is. I like it. It's sleek. It's not bulky. It's just fits in a jacket or a back pocket or a front pocket easily. It's not giant and filled with old receipts that why do you even have those? Also, Father's Day is coming up. It's right around the corner. So why not help your dad out? He's probably got one of those giant fat wallets that every dad seems to have. So get him one of these. It's a great gift. Also, you guys, if you go through the link below and use the code MEGAPROJECTS at checkout, you'll get 15% off the cost of a Ridge wallet. It's an excellent product. It's an excellent deal. Perfect for Father's Day. And now today's video. As global climate change becomes more and more of a concern, a lot of attention is being placed on how to reduce fossil fuel usage. Cars are one of the largest sources of damage that has been done. Globally, automobile emissions only account for roughly 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. In the United States, where public transportation leaves a bit to be desired, to put it charitably, that number rises to 29% of greenhouse gases. Both electric cars and increased use of public mass transit systems are emphasized as important steps to reduce future climate change. With that in mind, let's go back 70 years to a time when this problem may have already been solved. It's October 1953. You step on board a brand new Swiss Gyrobus, a remarkable electric bus powered by a flywheel. You immediately notice that unlike electric trolleys, there are no wires overhead, meaning that the bus is free to take whatever route it wants rather than follow the rails. It's also both the quietest and smoothest ride you've ever taken. You think that surely this must be the technology of the future, that this no Gyrobus will revolutionize public transportation, not just in Switzerland, but all around the world, and yet 7 years later, the Gyrobus would be extinct. Let's dive in. Seeing as the flywheel is the mechanism that powered the Gyrobus, it's probably important that we understand how such a device actually works. As the name implies, a flywheel is a large wheel or disc, usually made of steel or other metals. Energy is applied externally to the wheel to make it spin on its axis of symmetry, which is fixed in place. Because of the conservation of angular momentum, the wheel will store kinetic energy in the form of rotational energy for later use. Flywheels have a number of uses, and as such, they date back thousands of years. The potter's wheel, invented around 3500 BC, and the spindle, dating back to around 10,000 BC, are both early examples of the flywheel. It's no surprise that the origins of the object would date back so long ago, because at its core, it's kinda just a wheel. The use of flywheels as a more general mechanical device goes back to the 11th century. Once rotating, the flywheel can serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Most relevant to the Gyrobus, the flywheel is a means of storing energy. Because of its consistent rate of rotation, it can be used to smooth out the energy output of a less consistent energy source. The wheel will act as an intermediary, storing the energy as it is generated and outputting it at a constant rate. It can also be used to output more energy than a generator would normally be able to produce. The flywheel can collect energy over time and then release it at a greater rate of output than the energy source was capable of generating. Finally, and also relevant to the Gyrobus, a flywheel can be used to control the orientation of a mechanic system because of its gyroscopic properties. The Greek word for flywheel is gyro, hence the bus's name. Bjarne Storsund, the head engineer of Swiss engineering company Maschinenfabrik Oerlikon, identified a problem with the contemporary public transportation system of Switzerland. Electric trolleybuses were common for public transport, but they were only able to operate on the rails that were built for them, and installing new overhead lines to power them was just too expensive. Many of the routes these buses needed to cover simply didn't have enough riders to justify the cost, but there still needed to be a solution to service these routes. Storsund wanted to build a type of bus that was less bulky and less likely to interfere with the existing electrical lines, but that was not confined in its route the way that the trolleybuses were. The immediate solution that comes to mind may be a diesel or a gas-burning bus, but motor buses at the time were loud, uncomfortable, and unreliable. Switzerland was also seeking to gain energy independence following 2 world wars, so electrical power was much more appealing than fossil fuel. The next consideration would be a battery-operated bus, but this also posed issues. Batteries were rather heavy for the amount of energy they provided, to the point that much of their efficiency was lost simply by trying to move their own weight. The technology just wasn't there yet, and battery-powered electrical buses are now only potentially just becoming commercially viable. When Storsund filed his patent for his flywheel system for his vehicles, his main objective was for them to be used in short-range industrial vehicles like mining locomotives. But of any possible uses that he proposed, it was the Gyrobus that would receive the most attention. The prototype Gyrobus was built using the chassis from a 1932 bus. The flywheel was located inside of the chassis between the 2 axles. Yep, that means it was taking up space that would otherwise be used for passengers in a traditional bus, but being able to see the flywheel that operated the bus would certainly be an interesting novelty, at least at the bus's inception. Now, if you're worried that a giant metal wheel weighing 3,000 pounds and spinning at 3,000 RPM might be dangerous for the passengers, then fear not. The flywheel was encased in an airtight chamber, and this was done primarily for the functionality of the device, as the chamber in which it was enclosed was filled with hydrogen gas at reduced pressure to limit air resistance from impacting the wheel, but it had the happy side effect of protecting the device from the hands of stupid children who, if left unsupervised for even a second, would undoubtedly try to touch the massive, incredibly fast-spinning wheel, because of course they would. With the prototype now complete, it was time to release this bad boy into the wild. The prototype Gyrobus made its first appearance in 1950, where it performed test runs around Zurich. It provided airport service and received a great deal of media attention, and then it was tested in other nearby towns. Zurich's public transport showed a lot of interest in the Gyrobus, but they didn't actually order any. They already had trolleybuses, trams, and motor buses, so adding a 4th type of vehicle to their arsenal just seemed like overkill. Commercial use of the Gyrobus wouldn't begin until 3 years later in 1953. It was October of that year that a private company, the Society Anom Gyrobus Yverden Granson, YGY, would inaugurate a bus service between the towns of Yverden and Granson. The GYG purchased 2 Gyrobuses to service this route. Unlike the prototype, the chassis of these buses were designed specifically for the Gyrobus, which allowed them to cut down on weight. So, how did the service go? Well, it was technically successful in that the buses did their job. The route between Yverden and Granson was 4.5 kilometers long, and the Gyrobus could travel at 50 to 60 kilometers an hour for as much as 6 kilometers without needing to recharge. While they could theoretically make the trip every time without needing to charge, road and traffic conditions can be unpredictable. So there were 4 recharging points between the beginning and the end of the route. The recharging points were located at normal bus stops, which allowed for minimal delays for charging. The buses were charged utilizing 3 booms attached to the roof of the bus that would come into contact with an overhead pole to provide 3-phase charging, a means of ensuring maximum charging efficiency. To recharge the bus took from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, depending on how much charge was needed. Despite everything working according to plan, demand for this route was not high enough for the venture to be commercially viable. Still, in October of 1960, 7 years after the experiment began, the Gyrobus service was shut down. This was the first of 3 locations to attempt use of the Gyrobus, and the final one to end its service. The second order of Gyrobuses came from the Belgian Congo. The city of Leopoldville ordered 12 buses to service 4 separate routes covering a total of 20 kilometers. This was the largest area covered by a Gyrobus service, and the buses built for Leopoldville were the longest Gyrobuses at 10.4 meters long. These buses had constant problems. Some were mechanical, such as gyro ball bearings breaking, or other mechanical issues stemming from high humidity. One of the biggest problems, however, was the drivers. The drivers liked to take shortcuts, which took them off the city streets and onto dirt roads. After rainfall, the soggy dirt paths were no match for the bus's weight at nearly 11 metric tons. Ultimately, those problems were manageable, and what killed this operation solution was simply the price. The high energy consumption was deemed too expensive, and the gyrobuses were swapped out for diesel-fueled motor buses in the summer of 1959. The final location to try out these gyrobuses was Ghent in Belgium. Ghent ordered 3 gyrobuses in 1956 that would service a route between Ghent and Merelberg. This was meant to be part of a larger network of gyrobuses, but after 3 years, the buses were taken out of commission. Once again, the gyrobuses were faced with problems. The operator of the Belgian railways felt that these buses were unreliable and was quoted as saying that the buses were spending more time off the road than on. The extreme weight of the vehicles also proved to be an issue in Ghent, where the buses reportedly caused damage to the road surface. Once again, cost was a major factor. The gyrobuses were intended to replace a tram line, but each bus consumed 20 to 50% more electricity than a tram and held much lower capacity of passengers. On the surface, the gyrobus seems like a fantastic idea. It was a fully electric means of mass transportation that did not require rails, allowing it to take any number of routes with only minimal infrastructure needed to construct the recharging stations at bus stops. It was a smooth, quiet ride that was extremely environmentally friendly, as the buses themselves produced no pollution. One major issue was the weight, though. The gyrobuses were extremely heavy, especially compared to the number of passengers they carried. However, the quality of roads has greatly increased since the 1950s, especially in Europe, and roads are subjected to far heavier vehicles without it causing any undue wear and tear on the road itself. Another issue comes from the flywheel itself. We mentioned earlier that in addition to storing energy, one of the uses of the flywheel is directional stability. Not only was this not the intended effect of the flywheel on the gyrobus, it was an unwanted effect. Handling these gyrobuses was particularly challenging for the drivers. The gyroscopic motion meant that the bus didn't like to change direction, so the drivers had to adopt different driving techniques to maneuver the bus. But at the end of the day, it really all came down to cost. Most of the issues with the early operations of the gyrobus were external factors, not issues with the buses themselves. The quality of the roads has improved, and drivers should know better than to take a passenger bus off-roading through the mud. Even the issue of maneuverability can be easily solved by having 2 contra-rotating flywheels attached to the same axis to counteract the gyroscopic effects on driving. With those other issues being solvable, and with the original Swiss buses traveling from Yverdon to Granson for 7 years with no issues other than a lack of profitability, cost was the big factor. A small issue is that the gyrobus was new and an experimental project. Had it taken a larger foothold in the transportation industry, economies of scale would have driven the price of the buses themselves down, leaving the only cost as the electricity to power them. This was the real problem, as electricity was expensive, at least relatively speaking. In the United States, 1 kilowatt-hour of energy in 1953 cost 32 cents, and in the best-case scenario for the gyrobus, it would take 3 kilowatt-hours to travel 1 kilometer. Gasoline, on the other hand, cost 27 cents a gallon, and the average bus gets approximately 10 miles per gallon. At those prices, it was roughly 56 times more expensive to power the buses using electricity rather than gas. Since then, gas has dramatically increased in price while electricity has come down. While both gasoline and electricity prices vary by country, the cost in electricity to run the original gyrobuses is approximately 1.5 to 2 times the cost in gas, depending on the country. One could argue that that's a small price to pay for a much more environmentally friendly option to citywide mass transit, much less than the 56 times modifier from the 1950s. But it's important to note that technology has come a long way in the past 62 years since gyrobuses stopped running, and it's possible newer designs could bring the operational cost of these electric buses to be lower than the cost of motor buses. Many attempts have been made to recreate something like a gyrobus, but thus far nothing has been successful. One of the major concerns is weight, as a flywheel suitable for powering an entire vehicle weighs tons. However, flywheels are again being implemented in vehicles in an auxiliary role. Flywheels are implemented in kinetic energy recovery systems, or KERS. In this role, they store some of the energy that is wasted when braking for future use by the vehicle. This is being used in a variety of vehicles, from trams in Dresden, Germany, to Formula One race cars. Perhaps someday a suitable solution will be found such that flywheels can power buses or cars more effectively, and the research is still ongoing.